How's it going?
Good evening, everyone. How are you tonight? I'm so excited to be meeting with you once again. I am very excited for this evening because it is date night. So Mr. and Mrs. Sour Patch are going to get tacos on this lovely Taco Tuesday after I'm done here. So I'm not going to stay too long. On this topic, we're going to open with an article that I found from the Daily Mail, of course, because you guys know I love them, about fast food, because this is the year that we are getting healthy, y'all, and it's very important because 1 in 8 U.S. adults, U.S. Americans, are addicted to highly processed food, a national survey suggests. So take this quiz to see if you are an addict. I looked at some of the questions. I'm definitely not, but hopefully if you guys are, this will be like an eye-opener for you. It says 13% of adults 50 to 80 exhibited an addiction to ultra-processed junk food. People who agreed with 2 out of 13 criteria were considered addicted to food. Oh my gosh, you only have to answer 2 of these yes to be considered addicted. Nearly half indicated at least one symptom of addiction to highly processed food. Before we start, I have to say I have been hearing a lot about seed oils, and I am questioning them a lot because I think that this is the bigger threat. I don't think anyone's drinking seed oil. I think the problem is highly processed, like fast foods and frozen foods and stuff. And seed oil is in all of that stuff, but so is sugar, and so is all of this other processed stuff. So let's look at some of these questions and see if you have anything to be concerned about. All right, are you addicted to processed foods? If you answer yes to at least 2 of the symptoms below, you could be addicted to highly processed foods. What do they mean by highly processed foods? Let's read that in a minute. I have such strong urges to eat certain foods that I can't think of anything else at least once a week. I've tried and failed to cut down on or stop eating certain foods 2 to 3 times in a week. My tolerance to food has increased so that I do not feel as satisfied as I used to. I spend too much time obtaining and consuming junk food. I've given up time spent on recreational and occupational activities in pursuit of junk food. I overeat to the point that I cause emotional problems at least once a week. I'm curious about that. I have an inability to fulfill obligations at least once a month, I'm assuming related to eating. I eat even when there is an increased risk of physical harm, such as while driving, at least once a month. I often feel tired or sluggish as a result of my overeating. I eat to the point where I feel physically ill at least once a week. I deal with withdrawal in response to abstinence or decreased use of ultra-processed foods, such as headaches, fatigues, and irritability. My eating behavior causes me a lot of distress 2 to 3 times a week. And I have significant problems at least twice a week in my life because of my eating, like problems with my daily routine, work, school, family, or health. So let's see if they give us a good definition of highly processed food. The only thing that I can say that I had any kind of affinity to out of these 13 questions was eating while on the go. And the only reason that I did that, I actually did that when I weighed the least I ever had in my life. And it certainly wasn't because I was addicted to processed food. It was because I was constantly moving and shaking. I had literally 3 different jobs and I was in school. So I was constantly going and doing stuff. And I felt like the only place and time I could eat was going between classes to my overnight job and then on to my hospital work. So I would eat on the way there. But let's see if they give us a definition of processed food, because that's a good question from Sir Darko. I believe he asked that question. I lost track of it though. Yeah, Sir Ranko Productions, excuse me. Eating a lot of highly processed food can have several negative health effects that increase a person's risk of serious health issues like obesity, heart disease, high blood pressure, and diabetes. New results come from the latest national poll on healthy aging conducted by the University of Michigan. Oh yeah, these are older people. I forgot to mention that. They are aged 50 through 80. The questionnaire asked respondents to report experiencing at least 2 of a list of 11 indicators of food addiction, in addition to 2 more questions to measure the extent to which their lives have been impacted by their addiction. Women were more likely than men to be addicted to ultra-processed foods like candy, salty snacks, sugary drinks, and fast food. So this is how they're defining it. Ultra-processed foods are candy, salty snacks, probably like Cheetos and Doritos and stuff like that. Sugary drinks like soda, and fast food like McDonald's. We all know exactly what they're talking about. Addiction to ultra-processed food was also found in 17% of adults aged 50 to 64 and 8% of adults aged 65 through 80. Men and women who considered themselves to already be in poor physical shape were more than twice as likely to exhibit signs of addiction, 32% and 14% respectively. Meanwhile, addiction to junk food was also seen in 45% of women who say their mental health is fair or poor, and 23% of men who say the same. So this to me looks like a symptom of having a poor mental health, like a poor rigor of mental health. Like they're already at risk of being maybe depressed or anxious, and they're using this to treat something else. And this is actually something that I talked about when I was in community college in Colorado. One of the classes that was keeping me so busy, I was driving from one place to the next without stopping, was I mentioned in my speech class, I think it was, I had the opportunity to talk about a reality TV show, and I chose My 600-Pound Life. And I was talking about how each one of these people always had something going on in their lives that was much bigger than food. They had serious emotional issues, and they were possibly being supported by somebody wrongly who was really encouraging them to do this stuff. They were being enabled, basically, or they were being abused by someone who is using food over them, or they had a history of difficult memories that they were trying to drown. Each one of these cases was very, very sad. I always felt very empathetic, and I wish that everybody would, because being obese is hard. Everybody knows that. It's like physically difficult. Like I'm coming down from the highest weight I've ever been in my entire life. And it wasn't fun. Like it made it very difficult to even like bring my knee up to my chest when you're sitting on the floor or whatever to tie a shoe. It makes everything more difficult. It makes climbing the stairs harder. It makes walking, running, and having fun with other people harder. It makes you feel self-conscious and miserable about yourself. And I don't think it's fair to say that it's entirely the fault of the people in this situation, because I know for a fact that there are graphs that show us our sugar intake has increased, but it skyrocketed, yes, when we started to combine our sugar with our seed oils. And I honestly think that might actually be the answer to all of this stuff. We need to start removing this combination of these different things because it's deadly. Like I know people don't really understand. People, especially on the right, tend to be kind of dismissive of obesity. They say it's all your fault. You have complete control over this. This is entirely up to you. And in a large percentage it is, but in some ways it's very difficult to control, especially if you have hormones raging against you. I think this is something that I constantly thought before too, and my ideas about this are changing, and then we'll get into the actual news. But I used to think that you should just be able to say, oh, I'm not going to do that anymore, and then you don't, and that's just how it works. That's a very simplistic, conservative way of looking at the world, and I don't think that's entirely correct, because when you start to argue with yourself about some of the details about your life, like, for example, depression, it's very much a case of telling yourself the wrong things at the wrong times, and they become automatic. You don't even think about them. You should have complete control over your mental state, but you don't. Sometimes you don't even realize what you are doing to yourself. And it's only when you sit down and start to read a book, like a book by Dr. David Burns, which is what I'm working through, because I don't want to be on antidepressants, especially if I'm trying to have a family, right? So it's not something you want during pregnancy. So you have to stop and think about what you're doing and why. You need to interrogate yourself very thoroughly. And you need to understand that you might be at risk for stuff like hormones and severely like repressed memories and all this other stuff, trauma that needs to be dealt with. That's what leads to a lot of obesity. But so does the combination of sugar and seed oils, and I really think that's where it's at. So I kind of have horrible news to start us off with today. I'm not very excited about this one, but it's very eye-opening. So I'm really ready to just hop right into it. So let's go. Opinion. Newsrooms that move beyond objectivity. Oh gosh, let me see if I can expand this a little bit. Can build trust. There we go. Can build trust. How exciting. That sounds wonderful. Let's see what this person has to say and what their background is. This is the Washington Post from yesterday. This is by a gentleman named Leonard Downey Jr., no relation to Robert Downey Jr., I'm sure. It's spelled differently. Leonard Downey Jr., a former executive editor of the Washington Post, is a professor at the Walter Cronkite School for Journalism and Mass Communication at Arizona State University. Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there because that's a stunning indictment of higher education. that the man who was in charge of the Washington Post and who is now teaching at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications in Arizona is saying that we need to get rid of objectivity, I'll bet you can't guess what his motivation is. Actually, I bet you can, because you guys are super smart. So let's follow through on this one. I think I can kind of skim the first part. We'll go to the bottom and you guys can kind of get his gist. Amid all the profound challenges and changes roiling the American news media today, newsrooms are debating whether traditional objectivity should still be the standard for news reporting. Objectivity is defined by most dictionaries as expressing or using facts without distortion by personal beliefs, bias, feelings, or prejudice. Journalistic objectivity has been generally understood to mean much the same thing. But increasingly, reporters, editors, and media critics argue that the concept of journalistic objectivity is a distortion of reality. So when you're trying to present reality objectively, you're actually distorting it. And let's hear his explanation why. They point out that the standard was dictated over decades by, here we go, male editors in predominantly white newsrooms and reinforced their own views of the world. Okay, so can you guys kind of see where he's coming from already? They believe that pursuing objectivity can lead to a false balance or misleading both sidesism in covering stories about race, the treatment of women, LGBTQ plus rights, income inequality, climate change, and many other subjects. And in today's diversifying newsrooms, they feel it negates many of their own identities, life experiences, and cultural contexts, keeping them from pursuing truth in their work. Okay, so I have to stop and point out to you guys, this man is all in, fully in favor of full-throated postmodernism, and he has the audacity to talk about pursuing truth. I guarantee you this man does not believe in objective truth. But let's continue. Something like this occurred during my early years in the field in the 1960s and 70s. This man was born in 1942. For the record. Under the leadership of a few editors, including especially the Post's Ben Bradlee, our generation of young journalists moved away from mostly unquestioning news coverage of institutional power. I was one of the editors on the Post's Watergate story, which spawned widespread national investigative reporting that continues today. Colleagues at the Post for other newspapers and broadcast networks reported skeptically on the unwinnable Vietnam War. Throughout the time, beginning in 1984, when I worked as Bradlee's managing editor, and then from 1991 to 2008, succeeding him as executive editor, I never understood what objectivity meant. Okay, so this man worked in a field and led a newspaper without ever understanding the word objectivity. And I feel like I could just close my case here against the Washington Post because this explains everything that's wrong with them. Absolutely everything. But we will give him the benefit of the doubt and we will continue. My goals, I didn't consider a standard for our newsroom. Of course he didn't. My goals for our journalism were instead accuracy, fairness, nonpartisanship, accountability, and the pursuit of truth, but not objectivity, because objective truth runs counter to postmodernism, which is very clearly what he's pushing here. Nonpartisanship was particularly important for a paper that was a national leader in covering politics and the government. As the final gatekeeper for Post journalism, I stopped voting or making up my own mind about issues. Okay, why? As Bradlee had, I insisted on non-involvement of Post journalists in political activity or advocacy of any kind except voting. I also worked to make the Post newsroom more diverse and encouraged everyone to have a voice in our decision-making. Okay, that's fine. That's how you're running your own workplace. It's interesting that he's encouraging his journalists to not be advocates for any cause, because that's certainly not been followed since he left. Now, the mainstream news media is coping with economic and digital disruption along with increasing competition for misinformation on cable TV and internet. Meanwhile, American society itself has been in upheaval over discrimination against and abuse of women, persistent racism and white nationalism, police brutality and killings, the treatment of LGBTQ plus people, income inequality and social problems, immigration and the treatment of immigrants, the causes and effects of climate change, voting rights and election inequality, and even the very survival of our democracy. Our democracy, as Michael Knowles says. Reporting reliably on all of this has critically challenged newsrooms, calling into question their diversity, values, and credibility. So I'm going to have to stop him right there, because the fact that he's burping all of these buzzwords out and onto the paper now after he worked in this field for something like 40 years is just a sign that he should have stayed engaged with what was going on instead of shutting off his brain, continuing on without understanding the term objectivity and forcing everybody else to do the same. He took a huge hand in this. To me, this is exactly what happens when you put a postmodernist in charge of the news, and none of this should be surprising. To better understand the changes happening now, I and former CBS News President Andrew Hayward, a colleague at Arizona State University's Walter Cronkite School of Journalism, investigated the values and practices in mainstream newsrooms today with a grant from the Stanton Foundation. What we found has convinced us that truth-seeking news media must move beyond whatever objectivity once meant to produce more trustworthy news. So let's highlight that. That's really, really interesting. Truth-seeking news media must move beyond whatever objectivity once meant to produce more trustworthy news. Okay, so we want to be able to trust the news, but we need it to be divorced from objective truth. Got it. We interviewed more than 75 news leaders, journalists, and other experts in mainstream print, broadcast, and digital news media, many of whom also advocate such a change. Sure they do. Of course they do. I wonder what they're teaching in journalist school these days. This appears to be the beginning of another generational shift in American journalism. Among the news leaders who told Hayward and me that they had rejected objectivity as a coverage standard was Kathleen Carroll, former executive editor of the Associated Press. Of course they did. The Associated Press was just roasted for putting out a style guideline saying that people were not to use the term "the" in relation to a group of people, like the mentally handicapped, the college educated, or the French. And everyone laughed at them for this, and they actually ended up deleting the tweet, saying they hadn't intended to cause offense. They didn't cause offense. They caused mockery. An offense, at least, is defensible. Mockery is just embarrassing, utter humiliation. So this is the woman who's agreeing with him and saying that, yes, we need to get rid of objectivity in our news stuff. So let's read what she has to say. It's objective by whose standard? So what she's saying is that objectivity is too objective for her subjective worldview. That would be postmodernism. Postmodernism loves the fact that no one can nail it down, and it's exactly what people who adhere to it strive to do every single day. And that sounds like it's exactly what our good friend Lionel is trying to do here too. That standard seems to be white, educated, fairly wealthy, and when people don't feel like they find themselves in news coverage, it's because they don't fit that definition. That's BS. BS. Objective news is meant for an objective audience, which is meant to be everybody around. Everybody in the country is supposed to have some form of critical thinking and their own objectivity. The fact of the matter is the public at large no longer has this, so it should not really surprise us very much that journalism doesn't either, and that this guy is advocating that we get rid of it altogether. I think it's just a sign of the times. It's just a reflection of the public at large that journalism is also going the way of postmodernism and critical theory. The whole, it's always white people. If you're not looking at the world through a white lens, you're not seeing it the way journalists see it. It's nonsense. That's critical race theory, and that's postmodernism in a nutshell. And what this guy is advocating is for the subjectivism of postmodernism instead of objectivity. There is some confusion about the value of good reporting versus point of view, said current Post executive editor Sally Busby, who noted that many journalists want to make a difference on such issues as climate change, immigration, and education. Oh, so they want to be activists. Yeah, remember when our friend just a few paragraphs back was saying that he didn't allow any of his journalists to be activists? I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because from the way he's burping all these buzzwords up, it's honestly surprising to me that, to me, it just sounds like this is an accumulation of everything that he really wanted to say when he was refusing to engage with this kind of advocacy. But now all these journalists are going with it, and they're just like, we're going to be advocates. We don't want to be objective. We want to just put things in our own way, and you need to figure out what's true based on what we give you because we are in charge. We're the gatekeepers of the information. Absolute nonsense. Anyway, I must digress. There's some confusion about the value of good reporting versus point of view. We stress the value of reporting what you are able to dig up so that you, the reader, can make up your own mind. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. But if you're only digging in on issues that you personally care about, how is that not just activism? And how are you actually giving people everything they need to make up their own minds? You're not. The consensus among younger journalists is that we all got it wrong. Emilio Garcia Ruiz, editor-in-chief of the San Francisco Chronicle, told us, objectivity has got to go. Shocking that this would be coming out of San Francisco, isn't it? This is truly where all the best ideas in the world go, definitely to die in any case. Garcia Ruiz is among a vanguard of print, broadcast, and digital news leaders who have increased their newsroom's diversity and created new avenues of communication among their reporters and editors to discuss issues and coverage. Some have assembled affinity groups or caucuses of staff members for women, blacks, Latinos, Asian Americans. That just sounds like segregation to me. I don't know about you guys. And involve them in newsroom decisions. I'm so irritated by reading the term LGBTQ+, and it's even worse when it's LGBTQIAA+. That's irritating. I don't even want to read it at this point. I'm uninterested in assimilating those people into my conversation, honestly. So they talked to people from the USA Today, Los Angeles Times, San Francisco Chronicle, the AP. Yeah, all these places suck really bad. Like they fell off a cliff. Nobody trusts these organizations anymore. And this is why. People are looking for objectivity, and they're looking for actual people who are actually seeking the truth, not affinity groups, not some kind of segregated racial group in a newsroom somewhere. Absolutely nonsense. We talked to CBS News, New York Times. These are just the worst of the worst. Oh my gosh, of the worst. Let's just go to the bottom. I love the news, but I really don't like journalists. Really don't like journalism, and my disdain for higher education is kind of showing because this man teaches at a college. He teaches at the Walter Cronkite School of whatever at Arizona State, and it's just gross. It's disgusting. This is the kind of stuff he's saying in classes every day, and these are the kind of ideas that journalists are taking home at night and studying and really taking to heart. There is no objective truth. You don't need objectivity. You're going to be lumped into a segregated group away from everybody else. Your role is to gatekeep information so that people don't suffer from disinformation or misinformation as judged by you because you're the king, you're the gatekeeper. This is what we're getting out of our higher education. It's such a waste. It's irritating and distressing. Let's read the last 3 sentences and move on to something a little more cheerful. News media should also be as transparent as possible about their news gathering decisions and processes. Yes. When possible, they should hire or designate an editor to field and act on readers' complaints and questions. Yes. Responsible news organizations need to develop core values by having candid, inclusive, and open conversations. Sure, whatever. Making these values public could well forge a stronger connection between journalists and the public. No, I don't think it ever will. I think that as long as the public at large is actually looking for objectivity, they're going to think nothing of you. You're going to be an object of disdain to them because you refuse to show them the world as it actually is. You only show them the world through your own point of view. I'll read this last sentence, even though it's not the final sentence of the article. We urge news organizations to first strive not just for accuracy based on verifiable facts, but also for truth. How is that different? See, this is where he is at war with objective truth. Really clearly in this article. What Carl Bernstein and Bob Woodward have called the best obtainable version of the truth. So you want a version of the truth. Okay, that makes it subjective. And that's why you don't understand objectivity, my good sir. You only want a version of the truth. You want your version of the truth. This means original journalism that includes investigative and reporting on all aspects of American life. Fine. This is interesting. Newsroom staff diversity should reflect the communities being covered. Not just gender and ethnic diversity, but also diversity of economic, educational, geographic, and social backgrounds. Inclusive newsrooms should encourage their journalists to speak up and be heard by their colleagues and leaders in making decisions about coverage. You know, the one kind of diversity that this professor at a higher education institution did not mention? Diversity of thought. Diversity of opinion, because he doesn't want that. He wants people who are lockstep in their understanding of subjectivity as the ultimate goal, of a version of the truth. The people in journalism today are not in search of truth. You need to read the news understanding that fully. These people are not going to tell you what has happened. They're going to tell you what they think happened. This is why I use Google, okay? This is why I go to biased sources that I know are biased, because I want to look through their little lens, right? I want to understand exactly what they're thinking. It's fine that it's coming from the left. I know that it's coming from the left. I'm not stupid. So I'm going to go through there and I'm going to read what they think, and then I'm going to say, okay, here's what a few different people think. And then I'm going to go over to the right and I'm going to be like, okay, here's what they think. So here's where these two lenses overlap. You see that? That is the tiny bit of truth that you can find, but you have to go to a bunch of different sources. And I am here to tell you that if you go to all the sources that this guy interviewed, you're not going to get a clear picture. You do need diversity of ideas. You need diversity of opinion. No matter what Lionel Downey says, he is full of nonsense. It doesn't surprise me at all that he was the executive editor at the Washington Post. Good riddance. I'm glad he's gone. It's too bad that he's teaching, and I'm so sorry that so many in journalism agree with him. But honestly, I hope that the American people are waking up in this one, and I believe that they are, based on how little people think of the journalistic institution at this point. Let's see what you guys are thinking. Oh, somebody said PB toast is a good snack. That is 100% the case. Taco Tuesday. I will be tacoing about it. I hope Dip and Dot Dolph don't fight while we're out, says Andy. That's correct. We're probably going to have to separate them, but we'll see what happens. U.S. Americans and U.S. adults are different things. That's true. I think that's a fair differentiation. What do they mean by highly processed? We covered that one. Nightmare says, hi. Hi, Nightmare. We are enjoying your music before the show every evening. How is Dip enjoying having a puppy in the house? He's not. He's very ambivalent about Dot. But I get the impression that they're going to be good friends, and Dip's slowly warming up to her. Whoa, food has a tolerance? I'm given meds so I can eat. Ooh, geez, that sounds terrible. I'm sorry to hear that. You should have like a normal appetite. And it should be pretty in sync with what you do during the day and in line with what your body needs. Serenko says, interesting. These are the same criteria for drug addiction assessment with drug replaced with food, obviously. Yes. They found that with rats, they could give them sugar, or they could give them something like, I think, cocaine or heroin, and they would go for the sugar more often because sugar's unbelievably addictive in a way that people don't understand. If you ever tried to go keto, you know firsthand what it's like to stop all those foods. You have a physiological response to quitting sugar. And this is what I mean when I say it's not just the conservative, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. It's not a big deal. You just need to tell yourself and it'll be fine. You get a headache, and you can't talk your way out of a headache. You can't talk your way out of jitters. You can't talk your way out of like fatigue and irritability and restlessness. A lot of that stuff is hardwired into your body because your body is acclimated to using sugar as its primary source of energy. So when you don't have it, your body feels like you're really lacking something. Don't look to me for medical advice. I'm not a medical professional, but this is my understanding as someone who's done keto and low carb and honestly counted calories and done everything else at this point. That's exactly what happens. And as Jordan Peterson says, you can't argue with pain. 100% true. Keenan says processed foods are also like prepackaged meals. Many seniors only eat those for dinner. Yes, that's true too, for sure. Control WQ says hola, hola. Keenan says sugar plus oil is like a booster to our natural process, temporary good feeling because it costs more than expected. That costs more than expected. Yeah. And Serenko says it's very easy to spiral with being overweight, gain a few pounds, get depressed, eat more processed foods, gain some more, repeat. It is a cycle. It is a spiral. And it's very hard to be in that condition because you can tell something's wrong, but you're not always sure how to fix it. So this is why I'm constantly kind of trying to talk about this and push it. I think it's really important. I would love to see Americans by and large get healthier and get wise to the issues that are there with the combination of seed oils and sugars, because I really, really do think that that is the problem. It's one of the problems. There's a bunch. There's a lot going on there. But all right, let's see here. Overly processed food doesn't make me fat, but tends to cause my pancreas to overreact and release too much insulin, which causes an excessive release of adrenaline. Oh, I'm very sorry. That can be really hard. You can get adrenal fatigue if you have too much adrenaline all the time. Serenko says objectivity doesn't exist to the postmodernists. That's correct. Keenan says objectivity is obviously having an object and an activity, right? I can work for the Washington Post now. There you go. Exactly. Cliff the Alien says democracy is when one side controls everything. Yeah, that's honestly what Democrats think. Lori says they have no credibility. Exactly. Bree says, hi guys. Hello, Bree. Keenan Smith. Keenan says, trust the news. News. They caused offense when they dehumanize those working at the AP. Yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed, but the AP actually talked a whole lot about the unvaccinated. And the case they made for not using the term the was that it dehumanized people. So it's like, all right, so you just showed us your cards. You were actively trying to dehumanize people who didn't get the COVID vaccine. Absolute nonsense. Oh, it just jumped again. I'm sorry. There we go. Just woke up from a nap, actually, and realized Lydia was live, so here I am. Welcome, Bree. Welcome. Keenan says Macron is polishing the boots. Macron is polishing the boots of the EU, watching how the Ukraine is getting paid. He's taking notes. Yeah, I feel like lots of countries are, unfortunately. Postmodernist thinking is where abstract art meets bureaucracy. Waffles are geese. I am the walrus, and now it's the law. Exactly. It's very interesting. And I think that I personally feel that postmodernism really marches hand in hand with a lot of the surrealist art and the acceptance of a lot of these mind-altering drugs. But that's just my personal observation. My husband got barbecue Doritos. No, don't eat the Doritos, Brie. Don't do it. She says they're weird. Okay, good. Andy says more from Nightmare, and he gave the link, Maximalism Records. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and switch from Top Chat to Live Chat. I switched from Top Chat to Live Chat because I am on top of it. All right, you guys, we are going to hop over to what's going on with MrBeast, which is not typically a segment that I have, but he has been doing really interesting things over the course of the last couple days. He's been doing really nice things lately, and honestly, people on the left are kind of shouting at him about it. So let's take a look at what he did and why they're mad at him. Using influence for good. YouTuber MrBeast, 24, pays to cure the sight of 1,000 blind people. Philanthropist gifts patients with Tesla and $50,000 college tuition after healing their vision, and makes $100,000 donation to optical surgeries across the world. What a gem of a person. I did not realize that he was only 24 years old. I don't know if you guys are familiar with MrBeast. He has a huge, I think the biggest YouTube channel. He's the top earning YouTuber right now, and he just constantly does really nice things with his money, which is pretty great. I mean, if you are in a position where you are so blessed and so gifted and where you have so much success and you're a good person, that money is going to amplify your character and you will do wonderful things like this. But it will not exempt you from criticism, as we're about to find out. So let's read what he did, and then let's see what the response has been. MrBeast provided phacoemulsification surgery to remove people's cataracts. I'd not seen that word before today, so bear with me. I'm sure I'm going to mispronounce it. The procedure sees cataracts removed with a vacuum and a new lens inserted. That is really interesting. The YouTuber teamed up with the vision care and surgery nonprofit SEES, S-E-E-S. YouTube's most subscribed individual just cured 1,000 people's blindness by paying for their simple eye surgery. Jimmy Donaldson, a 24-year-old known online by his moniker MrBeast, released a video detailing the scores of people from the US and across the world whose severe cataracts he had removed with the help of a nonprofit eye care organization, C. They said C's. I'm not sure now if it's C or C's. MrBeast also gave away $10,000 to a number of patients, bought one a Tesla, and even donated $50,000 to another's college fund. He also donated $100,000 to C. Donaldson is known for his outlandish stunt videos, which include him being buried alive for 50 hours and another wherein the last person to take their hand off a private jet gets to keep the plane. Wow. In addition to being YouTube's most subscribed individual, he's also one of the website's highest earners. I'm sure he is. The second person MrBeast provided the surgery for, he helped with the curing of 998 more. That is so sweet. In the video, MrBeast shows patients getting their bandages removed after surgery and shows their reaction. For many of them, it was the first time they had seen properly in decades. One patient was a man named Charlie, whose deteriorated vision prevented him from working anymore. After receiving the surgery, Charlie is able to see again, and MrBeast gave him $10,000. I just haven't been me for the last 62 years, one patient tells MrBeast in the video. I can actually see your face. Another man said the first thing he wanted to see when his bandages came off was his son, who he said had been his rock throughout his vision problems. Seeing his face, that's what I miss the most, he said. As soon as he came out of surgery, his son was there and the two embraced in tears. For sure, what a wonderful tale. I can see everybody's facial features now, he said, wiping away a tear. It's a little blurry with my tears coming out. Yeah, no kidding. Goodness gracious, this is great stuff. Well, let's read the response to MrBeast's incredible acts of kindness. Go away, MSN, NBC. Sorry, an insider. YouTuber MrBeast defends himself after a video in which he said he was curing 1,000 blind people divided viewers. There were a couple different ways this was diced up. It was really interesting, but I have to stop and ask you guys, which side of the aisle did the criticism come from for this one? Because it's exactly what you expect. I mean, 100%. Let's read some of the criticism. YouTube star MrBeast posted a video about helping 1,000 blind people get eye surgery. The video received a mixed response. Some people suggested the altruistic act was done for clout. He doesn't need clout. He has like a zillion subscribers on YouTube. He responded to online criticism in a tweet 2 days after he posted the video. Excuse me, I get talking too fast. MrBeast, the world's biggest YouTuber, responded to online criticism after a video where he paid for 1,000 people to access eye surgery sparked criticism among some viewers. The YouTuber, whose real name is Jimmy Donaldson, uploaded the video on January 28th, and it received 59 million views within 3 days. In this video, we're curing 1,000 people's blindness, Donaldson could be heard saying at the beginning of the video as he stood in front of a large crowd. Donaldson said he was paying for people to get sight-restoring cataract surgery and filmed the patient's reactions to seeing clearly again. The YouTuber interviewed Jeff Levinson, an ophthalmologist and surgeon he worked with, who said half of all the blindness in the world is people who need a 10-minute surgery. Wow, that's crazy. Jimmy picked exactly the right operation to help these people. It's short. It's cost effective. They probably just couldn't afford it because they make too little. And I'm so pleased to see a member of Gen Z doing this. This is the nicest thing I can imagine. But let's continue on. A subsequent Instagram post from a nonprofit organization, C International, whom Donaldson collaborated with on the project, stated that the organization conducted the 1,000 surgeries around the world over a 3-week period for the video. According to the nonprofit myvision.org, cataract surgery costs an average of $3,500 per eye. So that is a little expensive. I understand why people would have a hard time paying for that. Donaldson also gave away various prizes to participants in the video, including briefcases which he said contained $10,000 each, a Tesla, and a $50,000 check for one recipient to put toward a college fund. The video initially received an overwhelmingly positive and emotional response. On January 30th, Donaldson tweeted that he did not expect the upload to receive such a large number of views in such a short time, receiving messages of support that praised him for his generosity. "I don't think you can watch that video without crying. Hope it inspires more projects like this," wrote one commenter. Not everyone viewed the video positively. Dun, dun, dun. Shocking. As the video continued to circulate, some people voiced questions and concerns about the cost and inaccessibility of eye surgery. Yes, the cost is probably higher than you would expect, but not for the reasons you would probably think. Most notably, political commentator and Twitch streamer Hassan Piker reacted to Donaldson's video in a January 29th live stream, saying watching it filled him with rage. He then alluded to the fact that many American citizens cannot afford surgeries due to their high cost or lack of medical insurance. It is so extremely frustrating that it is up to one YouTube guy to decide to make content out of it when people who are too poor can't just effing see, he added. Hassan Piker is an entirely different ball of wax, and I have no further comment on him. Piker's comments sparked a wider discussion on Twitter, where clips from the stream were reshared among some users who wrote that they thought people should not be turning to wealthy influencers to fix widespread societal problems. The Zatzman, which I think is affiliated with the Young Turks. Let's see. No, it's not. Never mind. It's just Hassan about this one. Hassan's response encapsulates my gut reaction when I saw MrBeast trending for his helping 1,000 blind people video. It's deeply frustrating to have to rely on a benevolent content king making feel-good videos rather than addressing the root causes of these problems. Sure, that's one incredibly negative and horribly self-centered way to look at it, but think about what the world would be like if he hadn't ever done this. Would you have addressed the issue of blind people, Hassan? Would you, other guy whose name I don't care to remember? I don't think you would have. Nobody would have ever given these people a second thought. And you might argue all you want for universal health care, but if you're not out there actually doing something about it and trying to actually help the people affected by a lack of health care, then all of your nonsense is just that, nonsense. Like, I happen to know that Hassan Piker is worth a lot of money, but he's not out there helping people like MrBeast is. He's sitting pretty in his capitalistic house while he shills communism and socialism to his followers. Several comments under the tweet accused Donaldson of paying for the surgeries as a way of gaining online clout and producing popular content, while other users said they thought the YouTuber had good intentions, pointing to the fact that Donaldson had previously said he reinvests all money made from the success of his channel into making more videos and on altruistic projects and giveaways to fans rather than keeping profits for himself. He defended his video and many fans spoke in his report. So I actually pulled this tweet up. Twitter, rich people should help others with their money. Me, okay, I'll use my money to help people and I promise to give away all my money before I die, every single penny. Twitter, MrBeast bad. And I commented something along these lines, but this is from John Hawkins. It says, it's not Twitter, bro. It's a very select group of woke people who are never happy about anything, so even someone helping blind people is just one more thing for them to complain about. And I think that's fully fair. And somebody commented, this is what I just said, but calling him bro is not acceptable. Haha. I'm like, okay, this man is 24 years old. Bro is the exactly correct term to use for him because he's very casual. He's very young. He doesn't expect a buttoned up suit and collar. He's literally wearing a hat in these scrubs with this doctor up here. And yeah, no, referring to him as bro is perfectly fine. But several users and prominent influencers wrote messages of support underneath his tweet, saying that they supported his charitable efforts. Donaldson became the most followed individual on YouTube, blah, 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 in November, has developed a reputation for posting altruistic videos that involve giving away large sums of money. I'm torn about this because I understand where the boring, woke, lefty shrews are shrieking from, but at the same time, I respect that he's done something good about this. He's used his capitalistic earnings to put them toward actually helping people, and I think that's wonderful, and something Hassan Piker has not done that I'm aware of. So he is actually making a positive difference in the world, even in a world that is as incredibly messed up as ours is, because the fact is, healthcare is hard to come by, but it's not because of capitalism. It is because of layers and layers and layers of bureaucratic red tape. It's because of health insurance requirements. I just spent a month fighting tooth and nail for an injected medicine that I take for multiple sclerosis that I had to prove, that my doctor had to prove, that my other doctor had to also prove repeatedly that I desperately need to prevent lesions in my brain and on my spine from growing, that I wasn't just shooting up this drug for some kind of fun high. It doesn't even give you any kind of high. They had to repeatedly request insurance approve this for me because they have have so many layers of red tape about what they will and won't pay for. Now, when it comes to insurance, there was a time when insurance was only for in case of emergency. Like 100%, you're on your deathbed, you're going to die if you don't get this surgery or else. In that instance, that was what insurance used to be used for. And I want to do a deep dive on this because it's very interesting how we got from there to here, where they are requiring every possible step to cover every possible step of the process itself. Like, are you going to the doctor for your routine checkup? Well, you better make sure that your insurance is okay with that. You better make sure you're fitting into their right schedule. And I appreciate insurance coverage as much as the next. But like higher education, the cost of healthcare has risen because it is being subsidized by, for example, the government and these insurance companies, and they work hand in hand with the pharmaceutical companies, and they work hand in hand with the government, with Medicare and Medicaid. This is not something that you can easily disentangle and pin to one thing, but I think overall we can, of course, blame it on too much bureaucracy, too much red tape, too many layers of nonsense, and really too much government, which is really not exactly what these lefties are arguing to relieve us of. They are literally just arguing that the government needs to step in and make this all possible. Planet Fatness, thank you so much for your adorable little avocado with his mic drop. He's so cute. I can only hope to be so cute and green as he is. But that's my rant about health insurance and my rant about the leftists on Twitter who are never satisfied. It's so boring. One of the things that Donald Trump never figured out is that you are never going to please leftists. And when you understand journalism as an institution, you understand that that is leftism and you will never make them happy. He recently went on, I forget what morning show it was, but he went on some dumb TV show and he expected them to laud him and to call him great and impressive and all this stuff. And of course they didn't. They're lefties. They're journalists. They're never going to like you no matter what you do. Donald Trump used to give the people who worked at his hotel $100 bills every time he saw them. MrBeast just paid for 1,000 people to get their site back and it still wasn't good enough for lefties. You will never please these people. The only thing you can do is build your own thing on your own terms and build your own community and network and support your own family. That's the only way we get out of this alive. So on the topic of President Trump, here we are from the Daily Mail. Touché. Ron DeSantis hits back at Trump and says his historic landslide re-election shows Florida people approved of his COVID response after Trump slammed him for shutting down the state. So this is kind of the sparring match that's been going on over in GOP land. So I recall the election in 2018 when Ron DeSantis won. Do you guys remember what a margin he won by in Florida? Now, Trump has been taking a lot of credit for getting DeSantis elected in the first place. He's been saying it's disloyal of Ron DeSantis to not openly support him full-throated, even though Trump has been calling him, Ron DeSantis, Ron DeSanctimonious. So, in 2018, when DeSantis won supposedly with the massive, magnanimous assistance of Donald J. Trump, he won by 0.4%. These people were inches away from having cracked out Andrew Gillum as their governor. Can you guys imagine that timeline? It would have been horrible. Donald Trump is taking credit for a 0.4% victory. Incredible. You know what DeSantis just did? Just recently, without a single bit of help from Donald Trump, he won Florida by 20 points. He won in a landslide. He won in counties that hadn't been red in decades. He turned Miami-Dade red. Unheard of. Incredibly well done. Great statesmanship. Great work from a governor of a state. So it really kind of bothers me that former President Trump is taking pot shots at Ron DeSantis because DeSantis is doing great things where he is. He is currently the governor of this state. He has also said that he won't run if Trump is running, but Trump is certainly acting like he will be running. For example, he is saying that DeSantis shut down Florida. So let's read what DeSantis has to say about that. Governor Ron DeSantis brushed off criticism from Trump after recent attacks, calling him disloyal and Ron DeSanctimonious. Very, very boring, I think. Low effort nicknames on that count. He said, "I roll out of bed. I have people attacking me from all angles." He said a verdict has been rendered considering his re-election in Florida, and he is correct. 20-point landslide. Excuse me. Trump repeated his new nickname for DeSantis in Truth Social posts on Monday after saying Saturday it would be disloyal if the GOP governor made a bid for the White House in 2024. And once again, I have to stop and say that we are not a mafia operation. This is not The Godfather. We don't do loyalty to politicians. We hire politicians to help us fix things that we see as problems in our communities. And that's the job they're hired to do. Can you imagine if an employee started working for a boss and then if they ever got fired, they called their boss disloyal? No, it doesn't work that way. You don't call the people who work alongside you disloyal because they don't agree with the way you work. It's just been really frustrating to me to watch. I wish that Trump would set his sights, for example, on the left and the people who really deserve it more, because we have a lot of stuff that we do agree on, and we could make a lot of positive change if we could point our forces in the same directions. The former president also claimed DeSantis' team is trying to rewrite history on the coronavirus response and slammed him for keeping Florida shut down longer than other states. But the Florida governor was unruffled at a press conference on higher education Tuesday, saying in response to Trump's comments, "I rolled out of bed. I have people attacking me from all angles. It's been happening for many, many years. So it's really nothing new," which honestly, good for him. I'm sure it's not new. He added, "If you look at the good thing about it, though, it's like if you took a crisis situation like COVID, the good thing about it is when you're an elected executive, you have to make all kinds of decisions. You've got to steer the ship. And the good thing is that the people are able to render a judgment on that, whether they re-elect you or not. So I would say that verdict has been rendered by the people of the state of Florida," DeSantis concluded, referring to his massive re-election victory in the 2022 midterms. DeSantis earned the ire of Trump after his increasingly popular policies in Florida led to national notoriety and whispers that he could seek a White House bid. So, Ron DeSantis has never said anything rude about Donald Trump. He has not been disloyal. His only flaw is being too successful in Florida. That is gross. That's gross. That's a wonderful thing. We should hope every single Republican governor is as successful as Ron DeSantis is. And I wish they were. Honestly, I hope that all of you guys are holding your governors accountable and trying to get them to do what Ron DeSantis has done, because his actions have really spoken louder than his words. DeSantis only earned his spot in the governor's mansion in 2018 after Trump swooped in the neck-and-neck race. The endorsement saw DeSantis jump in the polls by double digits. Right, but he still ended up only winning by 0.4%. Ron would have not been governor, blah, blah, blah. Ugh, I'm so uninterested in all this stuff. I hate these kinds of party politics. I really wish that we would just focus on what's in front of us. And DeSantis has been passing crazy education reforms. And Trump has also been speaking about education, which is awesome. And these are some of the real issues we're facing. And I wish we could keep our focus on that instead of turning toward each other and pointing fingers and yelling. I just think it's so unproductive, and I wish that Trump would focus in on the really big issues. And I have to admit that I was very disgusted that he insists still on taking credit for Operation Warp Speed, and that is hiring Anthony Fauci and pushing through the vaccine. And he just recently said that 100,000 more people would have died if it hadn't been for his vaccine efforts. So, I mean, good for him if you want to take credit for the vaccine, but I also happen to know that a lot of his very own supporters really don't like the vaccine very much and have a serious issue with some of the side effects and a lot of disdain for that entire field, and certainly not big fans of Anthony Fauci. All right, let's read this one. Let me think. We just got a couple other things here. So we're going to talk about, the California reparations panel. We'll see what we get to. I don't think we're going to talk about this one. We're going to talk about this. California reparations panel calls for 10 prisons to be closed, prisoners to be paid fair wage and given the right to vote. California's reparations task force met in San Diego last weekend. Just so you guys know, before we go forward, California was not a Confederate state. They were always a free state in league with these states in the northeastern part of the country. California's controversial reparations panel is pushing for the state's legislature to close 10 prisons, in addition to ensuring current inmates also receive fair wages and be eligible to vote. Most felons are not eligible to vote ever again, even after they're released from prison. That's my understanding. It was earlier reported that the panel was seeking to pass laws creating a wealth tax, mansion tax, and or a property tax in order to fund the $1 billion reparations. The purported figure being mentioned per person is $223,000. That's almost $250,000 per person. At their meeting in San Diego this weekend, where expert members of the public testified about various issues including prison reform, the panel preliminary approved recommending that 10 prisons be shuttered while debating what should be done with the sites. 10 prisons. This looks incredibly disorganized, and watching these people speak does not exactly boost confidence because they don't know what they're talking about. And honestly, San Diego or San Francisco? It's San Francisco. San Francisco has seen a lot of trouble lately, and California is bleeding residents to other nearby states like Texas, Utah, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and all of those other states because no one wants to live there. In fact, the Daily Wire recently, it was like a year and a half or 2 years ago, moved out of California because of the insanely oppressive COVID lockdown, as well as the crazy taxes. And these people are crazy to be pushing this kind of idea in the current state of California. California state prisons house some of the most notorious prisoners in the country, including serial killers and lifelong gang members. You should definitely let them out for sure. The savings made from closing the prisons will be used to fund the work of the new government agency being set up to dispense the reparations, the California American Freedmen Affairs Agency. The group has recommended more cushy treatment for current inmates that includes eliminating certain types of punishment and paying them more money for work done while incarcerated. The panel's report recommended removing the right to cancel visits as a form of punishment. The report also recommended developing safe spaces for prisoners to spend time with their children in non-institutional, non-punitive settings. That all sounds very wholesome. I do not think it's fair that they earn as little as they do earn. I do know that Kamala Harris actively used prisoners and kept them in prison longer than necessary so that they could help with firefighting in California. She's a Democrat, so nobody ever says anything about that, but there is certainly corruption inside the prison system, and a lot of that is incredibly unfair. A lot of those prisoners are treated as functionally slaves, which is a gross violation of the Constitution with how little they are paid. I do think that is disgusting, but the way California is tackling this, oh my goodness, it boggles the brain. The report wants to allow inmates to be able to choose what programs and jobs they undertake while in prison, as well as providing more funding for educational opportunities for prisoners. Sure, I don't have any problem with that. The names and locations of the prisons was not established in the report. California has 34 active state prisons, so they want to shut down a third of California prisons. Interesting. An activist who spoke at the prison systems about the prison system told the panel, "There's no way we're getting rehabilitated in these jails today, and I heard you guys say, let's train them better. No. If you guys want to be serious about reparations, let the last for first on this one. I lost one brother in 2011 in the penitentiary. He died from staph infection. 4 years ago, my older brother got sentenced to 27 years to life for manslaughter, which only carries up to 11 years. That does sound like a weird, gross miscarriage of justice. If it's true that that's supposed to cap out at 11 years in the state of California, I wonder if it was under Kamala Harris, ended up giving him 27 years. But that also assumes it was only for one charge. I'm not sure if it was just one charge for his brother. He's probably not telling us the whole story. They still doing it to us today. Let's stop this. The task force has yet to establish the amount of money that will be dispensed, nor have they established what prerequisites recipients will have to meet. At the most recent meeting, a California residency was mooted as the only prerequisite. Interesting. Task force member Cheryl Grills said this past weekend, "We want to be as inclusive as possible because the harm is everywhere. It's omnipresent and it touches all Black folks. So we're going to be very inclusive of all Black folks." Kamala V. Moore, the task force chairperson, said that the panel may support allowing those who were harmed in California but moved to another state subsequently to apply. So this would extend all throughout the U.S. to anyone who could ostensibly prove they were harmed in California. The only states in the Union that currently allow inmates to vote are Maine and Vermont, which count Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders among its representatives. According to the Vera Institute of Justice, 28% of California's 90,000 inmates are black, while 20% of those in county jails are also black. So here we have career criminal Marion Knight, founder of Death Row Records, not due for parole until 2034. Pedophile and killer Marcus Wesson Wright is on death row after being found guilty of killing 9 of his children. Killers like the infamous Golden State Killer could be about to receive more money for prison work. That's fine. I think it's fine if you earn more money for your prison work. I think that your work should have value no matter what you've done in your life. Other recommendations include giving the right to vote to inmates, allowing inmates to be paired at fair market rate for work done while in prison, eliminating the death penalty, more college scholarships for black high school graduates, and making zero interest loans available for black-owned businesses. So this just sounds like a cash grab for everybody who's had some kind of racial identity group driven into them from the beginning. This sounds like people who have been looking for a way to make bank on their CRT learnings. Let's see here. Let's see what you guys are thinking, because I know what I think already. Andy says, I'm not a very big fan of the Trump vaccine. I'm not either. Surenko says, I used to love visiting San Fran when I was a kid. It has fallen so much in such a short time. The only reason for not paying prisoners for their labor is because the prisoners cost the taxpayers money. They're paying for their own imprisonment. Oh, there you go. There's your reasoning. Apparently, temporarily locking your Twitter is boosting engagement for people again. I'm trying it because mine went from great to zilch. Yeah, I noticed a sharp decline in Twitter engagement. It's rather sad. Now, I am ready to be called a TDS victim. I'm certainly not a TDS sufferer. I just wish that Trump would stay on task. So let's go back and read those comments from when I was talking about him lashing out at DeSantis. All right, Fight Club, pair rant mic drop. Parent, oh yes, it's a parent. Lydia, get out of here. Your marriage is more important than us. We're going soon. Our reservation is for 8. We'll be fine. Thank you, though. We may need a second cam for Dot. Andy, yes, 100%. You guys can follow our Instagram, which is at the Leiterdips, LEITERDIPS. .cam, LOL. Yes, indeed. To be fair, they also got an influx of people moving there to California. I don't believe so. I believe their net loss was something like almost 500,000 people moved out. Would prefer RDS for one very simple reason. Tired of the senior citizens not stepping aside. Yes. So by the time Trump returned to office, I think he would be 80 years old. You guys are welcome to fact check me on that one. I used to love, San Fran. Would it boost my engagement with my 4 followers? LOL. Yes, for sure. Yeah, you can definitely lock your Twitter account and see if it helps. Jimmy James Donaldson. This tells me if Jesus were here today healing the blind, woke people would have a problem with it. Yeah, 100%. He appeared in a 1959 cartoon short, How to Have an Accident at Work, where his father wants him to help make the household safer and less hazardous. Donald's son, possibly named Donald Jr., is an anthropomorphic duckling who is the tattler son of Donald and Daisy Duck. 100% appreciate that. That's great. All right, you guys, I think I'm going to wrap it here because it's almost time and I have to make sure we have enough time to get over to the taco shop for this Taco Tuesday. Wish us luck leaving the puppy alone for sure. Hopefully that ends up working out well. She will need to be left alone at some point in the future, and she does love naps, so she might be just fine. Hopefully she will be. But I will be here tomorrow night, same time, same place, and until then, bye guys. How's it going?